Ladies and gentlemen, President Trump just doubled down on what might be the single most ambitious promise that he has ever made. Now, as you all know, about 3 weeks ago, President Trump imposed his Revolutionary Liberation Day tariffs, effectively charging an entrance fee to any country that wants access to the American consumer market. And so for the last 3 weeks, we've all gotten to witness firsthand the monumental success that those tariffs have created, which we're going to break down a little bit later on in today's video. But first, take a look at what President Trump himself had to say just yesterday afternoon. When tariffs cut in, many people's income taxes will be substantially reduced, maybe even completely eliminated. Focus will be on people making less than $200,000 a year. Also, massive numbers of jobs are already being created with new plants and factories currently being built or planned. It will be a bonanza for America. The External Revenue Service is happening. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. President Trump just doubled down on completely eliminating the federal income tax for the vast majority of Americans. And you know what? Check this out. Here's some of the math behind President Trump's strategy. Around 95% of Americans make less than $200,000 a year, but the total federal income tax collected from this 95% of Americans only accounts for about 28% of annual income tax revenue. What this means is that President Trump can cut taxes for nearly every single American worker, 95% of them, and easily make up for it through the revenue that his tariffs are already generating. Now, to give you guys a little bit more context here, take a look at what President Trump said about tariffs and American prosperity just the other day.
From 1789 to 1913, we were a tariff-backed nation, and the United States was proportionately the wealthiest it has ever been. So wealthy, in fact, that in the 1880s, they established a commission to decide what they were going to do with the vast sums of money they were collecting. We were collecting so much money so fast, we didn't know what to do with it. Isn't that a nice problem to have? What do you think, Marco? Good problem? Marco would love that problem. But we don't have that problem anymore, but we're not going to have it very much longer, I will tell you. But they collected so much money, they actually formed a commission to determine what they were going to do with the money, who they were going to give it to, and how much. Then in 1913, for reasons unknown to mankind, they established the income tax so that citizens, rather than foreign countries, would start paying the money necessary to run our government. Then in 1929, it all came to a very abrupt end with the Great Depression, and it would have never happened if they had stayed with the tariff policy. It would have been a much different story. They tried to bring back tariffs to save our country, but it was gone. It was gone. It was too late. Nothing could have.
And so you know what, folks? Everything President Trump just said is absolutely true. America was at its absolute wealthiest, its most powerful, when trade tariffs funded the federal government instead of federal income taxes. And I'll tell you what, here's why it matters. Americans are better at spending their own money and stimulating the economy than the federal government could ever dream of being. When Americans keep more of their own money, it means more spending, more investing, and more growth. And now, folks, while we're talking about all of this, I want you all to take a look at what President Trump's Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnik, had to say about all of this a month ago. But first, I do want to say real quick that if you guys enjoy the daily news updates, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. But all right, ladies and gentlemen, take a look at this, and then we're going to have a lot to talk about.
But it sounds like you're saying, trust us. And are you worried that at some point, Americans are going to feel like there's a bunch of billionaires in Washington who are playing Russian roulette with our retirement?
$2 trillion deficits don't bother you at all. How could you ask me, while we're running a $2 trillion deficit, and not care? You're destroying the people who have run this country before, are destroying the future for my children and my children's children. I can't have a 50, 75. We have a $36 trillion deficit. And we used to run deficits of $400 billion. Now $2 trillion, everybody's like, Who cares? I tell you what, who cares? Donald Trump cares. And when we balance the budget, you know what that means? That means our deficits stop. Interest rates come smashing down. His goal is to have external revenue. You know, the way I think about it, we all are so used to paying taxes. We're so used to it. We have like Stockholm syndrome. You know, don't stop the Internal Revenue Service, God forbid. How about this? The rest of the world leans on our economy, breathes off our economy. Not only is our economy $29 trillion GDP, but we consume $20 trillion a year. We are the buyer of everybody's stuff. We buy everybody's stuff. So who's more important, the people who sell stuff or the people who buy stuff? So we are the buyer of everybody's commodities, products, goods and services. Everything comes from us, right? Let them pay a membership fee. We all understand that model. Let them pay. How about we, you and I, and every single person we know pay less? How about no tax on tips? How about no tax on overtime? How about no Social Security? How about all those things? These are the kind of thoughts that will change America. I know what his goal is. No tax for anybody who makes less than $150,000 a year. That's his goal. And that's what I'm working for.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, keep in mind, when Howard Lutnik said all that a month ago, the plan was to eliminate the federal income tax for everyone making less than $150,000. But now, they've expanded that plan to cover every single American making less than $200,000. Like we said earlier, that is 95% of Americans. So, folks, that is how effective President Trump's liberation tariffs have truly been. But you know what? Okay, let's talk about the numbers here. Right now, economists estimate that Trump's tariffs are bringing in around $500 million per day. That's around $15 billion per month. Meanwhile, inflation continues to fall. Private sector job creation continues to beat expectations by around 50%, and the Dow Jones is now higher than it was 12 months ago. Ladies and gentlemen, President Trump's tariffs are actually working. They're not just balancing the budget, no, they are rebuilding the entire American economy. And let's be honest, this is what it looks like to put America first. Instead of taxing hardworking Americans, we're finally putting the burden where it belongs on countries who have been ripping us off for decades. America's working class, the backbone of our country, is finally getting a break. They finally get to keep what they earn. Meanwhile, countries like China, the world's largest trade abuser, gets to foot the bill. And like you all heard President Trump say himself, this is how America used to operate when we were, by the way, at our most prosperous. So bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, President Trump's Liberation Day tariffs are working, and this is what it looks like when a president finally puts America first. Now, folks, before we wrap up with today's video, I want to say real quick that I've actually gone ahead and made a community Facebook page where I'll be posting additional news and updates as it relates to all of this. So if you guys use Facebook, check out the pinned comment down below and give that page a follow. But everyone, that is going to be a wrap for today's video, so please go down below and drop a comment. Let me know what you think about all of this. Please like the video while you're down there. As I said earlier, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton with my daily struggle here on YouTube. Thank you all very much for tuning in today, and of course, as always, stay safe.